The strongest battles for dominance are not fought with words or weapons. They happen in silence, through the eyes. A single gaze can crush confidence, ignite desire, or bend another's will without a sound being spoken. Yet most walk blindly through this arena, never realizing how much control they surrender each time their eyes falter. Why is it that some faces command entire rooms with a glance, while others are overlooked, no matter how much they try? Machiavelli understood what many have forgotten. Eye contact is not about connection, it is about control. It is not a signal of honesty, nor a gesture of warmth. It is a weapon, silent, sharp, and absolute. What you are about to discover is not the soft psychology of kindness, but the brutal law of presence. Master it, and your eyes will no longer look. They will command. Most people enter the arena of eye contact unarmed, unaware that they are already playing a game of power. They think of it only in two narrow ways: a gesture of friendliness, or a moment of awkwardness. To them, eye contact is either a sign of being polite or something to avoid because it feels too intense. What they miss is that eye contact is never neutral. Every look either builds your presence or erodes it. Every second you hold or break the gaze shifts the invisible hierarchy of the interaction. The misuse of eye contact is almost universal. Some avoid it entirely, darting their eyes away as soon as pressure builds. This signals insecurity, weakness, or submission. Others overcompensate, staring too long in an attempt to appear dominant. But this usually communicates desperation or aggression, and it unsettles rather than commands. And then there are those who simply lose focus, breaking eye contact too soon. The instant they do, they lose control of the frame, even if the other person never consciously notices. Society conditions people to misuse their gaze. From a young age, children are taught that staring is rude, that lowering your eyes is polite, that looking away shows respect. These lessons may protect social harmony, but they also strip individuals of their natural dominance. Predators in nature never look away. A wolf does not lower its eyes to a rival, nor does a hawk avoid locking onto its prey. The human animal is no different. Deep in our instincts, the one who holds the gaze longer without flinching is perceived as stronger. Yet culture has trained most people to abandon this primal weapon, leaving them powerless before those who know how to use it. This blindness creates an unspoken hierarchy in every room. The boss who scans calmly, holding eye contact with confidence, commands attention without saying a word. The employee who drops his gaze first confirms his lower rank. In arguments, the one who maintains steady eyes forces the other into a defensive position. In seduction, the one who controls the rhythm of looking and looking away creates irresistible tension. Each of these battles is fought silently, but the consequences are undeniable. The dark insight is this: losing the gaze means losing the frame. The frame is the invisible boundary that defines how an interaction is interpreted. Whoever holds the gaze sets the frame, and whoever breaks it accepts the other's reality. This is why interrogators use prolonged eye contact, why predators stalk without blinking, why leaders are remembered for their piercing stares. Words can be denied, gestures can be misread, but the eyes always reveal who holds command. Most people misuse eye contact because they treat it as decoration, not as a weapon. They look away to appear polite, stare too long to appear confident, or break too soon out of fear. In all cases, they surrender control. Influence begins with the gaze, and those who do not master it will always find themselves mastered by others. From childhood, people are told a story so simple and repeated so often that it feels like an unquestionable truth. If someone looks you in the eyes, they must be honest. Teachers say it. Parents reinforce it. Society praises it. A steady gaze, we are told, signals sincerity, connection, and trustworthiness. This belief is comforting because it seems to offer certainty in a world full of uncertainty. If eyes never lie, then perhaps we can use them as a compass to judge people's true intentions. But this is the beautiful lie, one of the most dangerous illusions in human interaction. In reality, eye contact does not reveal honesty. It creates the appearance of honesty. Skilled manipulators understand this, and they exploit it without hesitation. A con man does not avoid your eyes. He looks straight into them, holding your gaze just long enough to convince you of his sincerity. Politicians do the same when standing on stages. They scan the crowd with unwavering eyes, making each person feel personally acknowledged, as if truth radiates from their gaze. But behind those eyes lies calculation. The gaze is not proof of character, it is a tool of control. The danger of this myth is that it allows deception to thrive. When someone lies while holding eye contact, the victim's instincts are disarmed. They think, "No liar would look at me like this," and so the lie passes unchallenged. The very act that should raise suspicion, the deliberate intensity of the gaze, is reinterpreted as proof of honesty. This inversion is why manipulators succeed. They weaponize society's teaching, knowing most people equate eye contact with truth. History offers countless examples. Leaders accused of corruption or betrayal have stood before the public, eyes fixed forward, denying guilt with steady voices and steady gazes. Crowds believed them, not because the evidence was convincing, but because the performance of eye contact created a sense of credibility. Lovers, too, have whispered promises they never intended to keep, gazing deeply as they lied, making their false words feel sincere. In both cases, the victim did not fall for the words, they fell for the eyes. The brutal truth is this: eye contact does not prove sincerity, it creates submission. When someone holds your gaze, you feel seen, you feel acknowledged, and this sensation of being recognized makes you lower your defenses. But recognition is not the same as honesty. In fact, it is often the first step toward manipulation. The one who commands your gaze commands your attention, and the one who commands your attention controls the frame of the interaction. Society's beautiful lie, that eye contact equals trust, keeps people vulnerable. They believe they are reading truth when in fact they are being led deeper into illusion. The strong do not fall for this trick. They know that a steady gaze may reveal dominance, but never guarantees honesty. To mistake eye contact for truth is to mistake the mask for the man. And in that mistake, power is always surrendered. Machiavelli understood a truth that most men still ignore. Power is theater, and every performance requires stage lights. For rulers, generals, and princes, those lights were not chandeliers or torches. They were the eyes. The gaze was not a window into the soul. It was a throne from which power could be projected. To look into the eyes of a ruler was to be reminded of your place. To meet his gaze and falter was to admit defeat before a single word was spoken. In The Prince, Machiavelli described politics not as morality, but as performance. He knew that perception mattered more than substance, that authority had to be displayed as much as enforced. Eye contact was one of the simplest yet sharpest displays of authority. A ruler who held his gaze without hesitation created the impression of unshakable confidence. A general who locked eyes with his soldiers showed that he was unafraid to command. Power radiated through the eyes, and people responded instinctively. This lesson stands in stark contrast to how the weak use their eyes. The weak look at others in search of approval, as if silently asking, "Do you accept me? Do you believe me?" Their gaze wanders, flickers, or retreats at the first sign of pressure. In doing so, they give away the throne. Their eyes betray them, showing submission where they hoped to show sincerity. The strong, on the other hand, never beg with their eyes. They do not seek validation. They use their gaze to impose reality, not to request it. History is filled with rulers who understood this instinctively. Alexander the Great was said to stare down entire assemblies before speaking, his silence amplified by unwavering eyes. Napoleon's presence on the battlefield was magnified not only by his strategy but by the piercing steadiness of his gaze. Even modern leaders, in business or politics, are remembered less for their words than for how their eyes carried those words. The gaze transforms speech into command. Without it, words float away. With it, they strike like weapons. Machiavelli would have laughed at the modern idea that the eyes are windows to the soul. To him, the eyes were tools of control, masks rather than windows. They revealed only what their master wished them to reveal. They could project warmth to disarm, steel to intimidate, or detachment to unsettle. This performance was not about intimacy but about dominance. To believe the gaze is always honest is to fall into the very trap Machiavelli warned against, mistaking appearances for truth. The forgotten lesson is this: the gaze is not a plea for understanding. It is a throne from which power is exercised. The strong use their eyes as weapons, forcing others to bend without realizing they are bending. The weak surrender their gaze too soon, and with it, surrender their authority. To master eye contact in the Machiavellian sense is to sit upon the throne of perception itself. And once seated, you no longer look, you command. In every corner of the natural world, survival and hierarchy are decided not only through claws, teeth, or brute strength, but through the gaze. Predators never look away first. The wolf that holds its stare asserts dominance, while the one that lowers its eyes accepts submission. Among lions, the alpha does not need to roar in every confrontation. The intensity of his gaze reminds challengers of their place. Eye contact in nature is more than vision. It is a silent contest of power. Humans are not exempt from this primal law. Social hierarchies operate on the same silent signals, even in spaces where no one acknowledges them. In the boardroom, the boss holds steady eye contact while speaking, forcing others to look down at their notes or avert their gaze. Subordinates may not notice the ritual consciously, but their instincts understand it. The one who holds the gaze controls the room. In negotiations, the individual who avoids breaking eye contact first often forces the other side into concessions before the actual terms are even discussed. The silent battle is already won before the conversation begins. This dynamic extends into personal relationships as well. Lovers test one another through subtle gaze exchanges. The one who looks away first concedes a fragment of power. Over time, repeated concessions build a silent hierarchy, shaping who leads and who follows in decisions, arguments, or intimacy. Parents use it with children, holding a firm gaze to establish authority. Teachers employ it in classrooms, commanding attention without words. Everywhere humans gather, the eyes establish the pecking order before a single sentence is spoken. The predator's gaze functions as an unspoken signal of status. In tribal history, leaders did not need to explain their position to the group. Their presence was reinforced by how long they could hold the eyes of others. Even today, politicians use this technique instinctively. The candidate who scans the crowd calmly, meeting eyes without flinching, projects authority. The one who blinks nervously, glances away, or avoids the audience entirely radiates weakness. The public feels this imbalance viscerally, even if they cannot articulate why. This truth is brutal. Eye contact reveals who owns the frame before words begin. The frame is the invisible boundary of reality that defines how an interaction will be interpreted. Whoever wins the gaze decides the frame. If you cannot meet someone's eyes, you are already operating within their world. They will speak, you will listen. They will dictate, you will adapt. Even if the words are polite, the hierarchy has already been established in silence. Most people remain blind to this process. They think the hierarchy is decided by job titles, by arguments, or by evidence. In truth, it is decided by the predator's gaze long before logic is brought into the room. To understand this is to see the invisible battlefield that shapes every meeting, every negotiation, every relationship. To ignore it is to remain prey in a game you never knew you were playing. Eye contact is a weapon, but like all weapons, it must be wielded with precision. One of the most common mistakes people make is confusing dominance with desperation. They believe that if holding a gaze signals power, then never breaking it must signal absolute control. But this is a misunderstanding. Staring too long does not project strength, it exposes neediness. What begins as confidence quickly decays into obsession, and obsession kills influence. True dominance lies not in endless pressure, but in the rhythm of pressure and release. Manipulators understand this well. They know that too much eye contact unsettles, not in a way that inspires respect, but in a way that reveals insecurity. The unblinking stare, when stretched beyond its natural tension, becomes unnatural, even pathetic. It communicates, I am trying too hard to convince you of my power. And once that effort is exposed, the illusion of control collapses. Consider how predators behave in the wild. A lion may lock eyes with its prey, but it does not stare endlessly. It watches, waits, then withdraws before striking. The predator uses rhythm, moments of stillness punctuated by decisive action. Humans respond in the same way. In conversations, a gaze that lingers too long feels invasive, stripping the moment of mystery. Instead of creating tension, it dissolves it. Instead of inspiring awe, it signals desperation. The contrast is clear. Obsession repels, but restraint attracts. The leader who looks steadily at his audience, then shifts his gaze with calm control, keeps attention without suffocating it. The manipulator who makes eye contact, then breaks it at the perfect moment, plants seeds of tension that make the other person lean forward, craving re-engagement. By withholding, he creates value. By pacing his gaze, he controls the rhythm of the interaction. In negotiations, this principle is even sharper. The amateur holds his opponent's eyes without blinking, thinking he has won the silent war. In reality, he reveals that he has no strategy beyond brute force. The strategist, however, applies pressure with his gaze, then releases at the exact moment to appear composed. This dance of intensity and withdrawal keeps the opponent unbalanced, never fully secure. Power is maintained not by suffocation, but by control of timing. The brutal truth is that control requires rhythm, not constant pressure. Just as music depends on silence as much as sound, influence depends on release as much as focus. To hold without pause is to exhaust the weapon. To pace with restraint is to wield it with mastery. The eyes, like any tool of power, lose their strength when overused. The strong know when to look, when to hold, and when to let go. The weak cling endlessly, hoping to prove dominance, only to prove insecurity. Eye contact should never be constant. It should be strategic. It should build tension, create mystery, and leave others unsettled yet intrigued. Master this rhythm, and your gaze will no longer suffocate, it will control. Eye contact is not only a signal of dominance, it is also the most primal tool of seduction and intimidation. Within the gaze lies the ability to awaken desire or to trigger fear, and the one who learns to wield both gains access to the deepest instincts of the human mind. Machiavelli would have understood this duality well. The same eyes that can draw someone closer with irresistible magnetism can also send them retreating in submission. Desire begins with the prolonged gaze. When someone holds eye contact just long enough, with subtle softness and restraint, it creates a spark of curiosity. The eyes seem to say what words cannot. Lovers have known this throughout history. A glance across a room can ignite an obsession, planting the thought that lingers far longer than any speech. Prolonged eye contact creates intimacy without touch, an unspoken promise that captivates the imagination. The seducer does not flood his target with constant staring. Instead, he uses rhythm, looking, holding, then breaking away to stir tension. The absence that follows makes the gaze even more intoxicating when it returns. Fear, on the other hand, comes not from softness but from sudden intensity. A piercing gaze delivered at the right moment can destabilize even the strongest opponent. Interrogators use this instinctively, locking eyes with suspects until their confidence cracks. The silence around the gaze amplifies it, forcing the victim to feel exposed, stripped of composure. Leaders, too, have used this tool in moments of crisis. A sudden, unflinching gaze can silence a room, stopping dissent before it even begins. Fear does not always require words, it requires presence sharpened by the eyes. This is the paradox of the seducer's eyes. The same tool that awakens desire can also enforce control through fear. The gaze becomes a mirror in which others see what they crave or what they dread. Lovers may interpret it as intimacy. Enemies may interpret it as threat. Followers may interpret it as authority. The gaze itself remains the same, but its timing, intensity, and rhythm decide whether it seduces or intimidates. What makes this power so dangerous is that it bypasses reason. Desire and fear are primal forces older than logic. Words can be argued with, but a look strikes directly into the nervous system. A prolonged gaze increases dopamine, stirring longing. A sudden piercing gaze triggers adrenaline, stirring alarm. Both responses are automatic, instinctual, and nearly impossible to resist. The brutal truth is this. The one who masters the seducer's eyes controls not only how others see him, but also how they feel in his presence. He can make them lean closer or shrink away, love him or fear him, obey him without knowing why. Politicians, interrogators, generals, and lovers alike have all used this unspoken weapon. The eyes are not passive, they are active levers of human emotion. And when you master them, you no longer need to explain yourself. Your presence alone dictates the outcome. Every interaction is a battlefield of perception, and eye contact is one of its sharpest weapons. The gaze is not simply about seeing, it is about framing. Whoever controls the gaze controls how reality is interpreted. Words can twist, gestures can be misread, but eyes direct the story in silence. When your gaze is steady and calm, you force others to question themselves. When your gaze is unshaken, you bend the frame of reality until others begin to doubt their own ground. Silence paired with the gaze is especially devastating. Most people cannot endure the weight of being looked at without words. The pressure grows unbearable, and they rush to fill the void with explanations, excuses, or nervous chatter. This is why interrogators hold their gaze in silence, because silence plus steady eyes is not emptiness, but a mirror that forces the other to reveal weakness. The more they speak, the more they expose. The one who keeps calm and silent controls the frame entirely. In arguments, this principle becomes even more obvious. Two people may shout, accuse, or justify, but the one who maintains unbroken eye contact without emotional leakage dominates the field. The gaze signals certainty, while the one who looks away first betrays doubt. Even if their words are correct, the loss of gaze undermines their authority. Perception bends not to facts, but to the frame. And the frame is owned by the one who does not look away. This is the essence of psychological warfare. Battles are decided before they begin. If your opponent feels seen but cannot pierce your presence, they start to doubt themselves. They misinterpret silence as superiority. They second-guess their own arguments. They stumble over words, trying to justify themselves to your eyes. At that point, the war of perception is already lost. You have not just argued, you have dictated the reality in which the argument takes place. Philosophically, the gaze works because people surrender to presence they cannot escape. Humans are conditioned to respond to the eyes of others, deeply wired into survival itself. The gaze of a predator froze our ancestors in place. The gaze of a leader inspired tribes to follow. These instincts still govern modern life, even in boardrooms and bedrooms. The calm gaze commands, the frantic gaze submits. The brutal truth is this: the gaze bends reality because reality, for most people, is not objective. It is social. It is built on cues, on dominance, on the invisible rules of perception. Eye contact is not just about honesty or intimacy. It is about control of the frame. To master it is to fight on a battlefield where most don't even know they are soldiers. And once you realize this, you no longer just participate in arguments, negotiations, or seductions, you command them. Because in the end, people do not surrender to logic. They surrender to presence. And presence, above all else, is carried in the eyes. The power of eye contact is not confined to history books or battlefields. It shapes boardrooms, relationships, and entire societies today. To ignore it is to remain at the mercy of those who already use it with precision. To master it is to step into a form of influence that operates silently but decisively. At work, eye contact is the difference between being heard and being dismissed. In meetings, most people scatter their gaze nervously, looking at their notes, the table, or their screens. This signals uncertainty. The one who commands the room does so by looking calmly at others, pausing, and holding silence. When you finish a statement, do not rush to fill the space. Hold the gaze, let the silence stretch, and watch as others scramble to respond. The one who endures silence without blinking appears unshakable, and unshakable presence becomes authority. In relationships, the gaze becomes a weapon of attraction and respect. Overexposure breeds contempt. Staring constantly or flooding your partner with attention dulls the magnetism. Scarcity creates power. A well-timed glance, followed by deliberate withdrawal, generates tension and desire. The absence makes the presence stronger when it returns. Lovers who master this rhythm control not just attraction but the balance of respect within the relationship. Too much softness in the eyes signals need. Controlled scarcity signals value. In society, the gaze is magnified through propaganda, media, and leadership. Politicians understand how to use their eyes to create trust or fear. Advertisements use models staring directly into the camera, bypassing reason to trigger subconscious attention. Leaders on television practice gaze techniques to appear more credible, more relatable, or more dominant. Once you recognize this pattern, you begin to see the manipulation everywhere. Every campaign poster, every staged photograph, every viral clip is a battle for your unconscious submission. But mastery of the gaze also comes with danger. To use it without restraint is to risk paranoia and collapse. An unrelenting gaze can turn into intimidation, alienating those you want to influence. Constantly calculating your eyes can erode authenticity, making you appear robotic or threatening. Worse, those who become addicted to controlling others through eye contact risk isolating themselves, living in constant suspicion of being outmaneuvered. The power of the gaze is immense, but like any weapon, it must be handled with discipline. The brutal truth is that you cannot escape the game. Whether at work, in love, or in society, the gaze defines hierarchies and sets frames. If you ignore it, you are used by it. If you learn it, you gain an invisible edge that few can articulate but everyone feels. The key is balance. Use your gaze to project authority, create desire, and detect manipulation, but know when to release. The eyes should not only command, they should also conceal. Power lies not in constant pressure but in rhythm, restraint, and awareness. Master the gaze in your daily life, and you will stop being unconsciously controlled. Instead, you will become the one who shapes how others feel, think, and act without saying a single word. Every lesson comes together here, in the dark silence of the gaze. You have seen how eye contact decides hierarchies before words are spoken, how it seduces with desire, unsettles with fear, and silently frames the reality in which others must operate. The eyes are not ornaments. They are instruments of power. The one who holds them with purpose does not just look. He shapes the unseen battlefield where influence is won or lost. To control the frame with your gaze is to dictate the story others believe. When your eyes remain steady, calm, and unshaken, you bend reality itself. People begin to doubt themselves before they doubt you. To seduce with desire is to use rhythm, not obsession. Glancing, holding, and withdrawing until tension grows unbearable. The absence of the gaze makes its return intoxicating. To unsettle with fear is to pierce at the right moment, destabilizing another's certainty and forcing them into submission. And to withdraw before overexposure is to preserve mystery, leaving others hungry for your presence instead of weary of it. The mistake of the weak is to believe the eyes reveal the soul. The truth of the strong is to know the eyes cast shadows. They do not expose what lies within, you decide what they project. Sometimes warmth, sometimes steel, sometimes nothing at all. This control transforms the gaze into a mirror, reflecting not who you are, but who you need others to see. The metaphor is clear. Eyes are not windows, they are shadows cast on others. Shadows can terrify or comfort, expand or contract, depending on how they are shaped. When you master your gaze, you master the shadows you cast. And once you master shadows, you master perception itself. Influence does not live in noise. Words can be argued. Reason can be resisted. Charm can be ignored. Influence lives in silence, in the weight of a gaze that cannot be escaped. The calm eyes that do not break. The steady presence that does not yield. The rhythm of looking and withdrawing that creates hunger, fear, and respect in equal measure. This is the essence of Machiavelli's forgotten lesson. The gaze as throne, as weapon, as shadow. The final truth is both simple and brutal. You do not need to shout, you do not need to explain, and you do not need to beg. The ones who master their gaze never chase influence. They command it. Master the eyes, and you no longer look, you command.